All right, well, now you're saying, hey, anthropology sounds great. I want to be an anthropologist, or at least I think anthropology's rad now. But what's it for? What's the purpose that it serves? Other than being a GER, other than, oh, cool, I get to learn some interesting stuff about past or present cultures. What does it do? Why does it exist? There's several ways to answer that question. I'll give a few. First of all, anthropology exists for the same reason any science exists. It exists to increase our understanding of the world around us. It turns out that a big part of the world around us is human beings. We are one of, if not the, driving force. We are one of the biggest driving forces on the planet. We have a term for that, Anthropocene, kind of controversial term, but the idea that humans are now the driving force of ecology and geology on our planet. And so whether we're talking about really big picture stuff or much smaller picture stuff, humans are a big part of our natural world, and so understanding humans are part of understanding that. I have a picture here of a forest in West Africa. There's been some really interesting research in West Africa on how human groups that it was assumed had deforested their landscape, and that's why you had patches of savanna mixed in with patches of forest. It was assumed that the local groups were overusing the forest. The opposite was actually true in some studies, like a classic one from the 90s where they found that people were actively promoting forests growing, that the original habitat, so to speak, without humans was savanna. Humans kept planting trees that they liked around their communities, and that led to this kind of some forest, some savanna thing. So humans were actually benefiting the local forests. The reason I'm giving that specific example is to make the point that humans are a big part of the world, right? And so if we're going to study the world with science, part of that's studying humans. Just advancing knowledge to some degree for knowledge's sake, or for all the different reasons we do science. There's other reasons, though, that we do anthropology. Arguably, it's there so we can help us better understand each other, so that we can live better. One time I was depressed and about what I was going to school for, and I was talking to my dad about it, who's definitely not an anthropologist, but one of the points he made is, he said, you know, it's so easy for me to look at people, for me, and he means not just him, but like anybody, to look at folks in another country, right, and assume wrong things because it's not the way of life I was raised in, and that can lead to all sorts of conflicts, right, between different groups of people. He says anthropology helps show us that common ground. So I would say that, yeah, anthropology helps us better understand each other, sometimes by showing common ground, sometimes by showing, hey, we're actually really different, and let's make sure we understand those differences before we stick our proverbial foot in our mouth. It also, I think, arguably helps us better understand ourselves so we can live better. And I see this as by far and away one of the biggest values for folks that are taking this as a GER. I hope that without getting super philosophical and weird about this, I hope part of what anthropology does is helps us better understand ourselves as human beings and maybe provide some, shall we say, scientific pushback to the sometimes incorrect ideas we have about ourselves because of the messages we hear about humanity growing up, right? Humans are greedy, humans are selfish, humans are aggressive. Well, picture's more complicated. I think anthropology helps us better understand ourselves in that way. Another thing that anthropology is for is engaged and applied purposes. And what I mean by that is that there are definitely anthropologists who are doing the scientific side of it primarily. They are primarily doing research for research's sake. Those folks may often be based out of universities, but there's a lot of anthropologists who may be out of universities, or maybe working for the World Bank, or maybe working for the Park Service, or maybe working for all sorts of different organizations, might be working for a tech corporation, and they're doing things where they're trying to understand humans better so that they can make programs better, whether those programs are products. So you have anthropologists who work in tech firms trying to design project, or trying to help make sure that products are user friendly by observing how the users use the product. So they do a lot of interviews and focus groups and things and actually going and being weirdos and hanging out in people's homes while they use technology, and then feed that back to the engineers so that they can make more user friendly tech. We call that user design research or UX research. So that's sometimes what anthropology is for, is selling products better that are more useful to people. it's also sometimes about solving human problems and helping the world to be a healthier place, a more just place, a more respectful place, a more sustainable place. You did a reading about that. It was talking about the Ebola outbreak in West Africa and specifically Sierra Leone in 2014. And there was anthropologists on the team that were trying to help uncover and make sense of why a lot of people were not trusting local doctors and really upset with local doctors. And that was hindering the effectiveness of the communication and relationship between the doctors and the public, which is, of course, not great for trying to put a stop to or slow down the outbreak, the epidemic. And as you read about in the article, a lot of different things came up about why there was this rift, one of which was doctors not sort of properly respecting local burial practices and people's understanding of how people are to be buried by their close kin in specific ritual ways. That allowed some of the public health people to do better outreach because they better understood the people they were outreaching to, which in turn allowed for them to make certain, not huge changes, but certain changes to how they did business, which in turn allowed the public to feel more comfortable with them in some of these areas, which in turn, as one article pointed out, probably led to thousands of lives being saved during this epidemic because people were taking better public health precautions because they had a better relationship with the public health people and with the doctors. So that's part of what anthropology is for then, is helping make programs work better, make international development efforts, if we want to go that route, work better, help make sure environmental programs work better for people and aren't sort of unduly burdening communities, things like that. Which leads us to the applied versus academic anthropology split. So like a lot of fields, like chemistry, like biology, there's sort of an applied and an academic side to what we do here. In theory, we have applied anthropologists who would be working for things like corporations or governments or nonprofits using anthropology to solve real-world problems. And in theory, you'd have academic anthropologists, this guy, folks working for colleges and universities, using anthropology to just better understand kind of humanity from a theoretical, sciencey perspective. That's in theory. The reality is often it's way, way more blurry than that. A good example of that is the fact that here at UAA, every single one of the full-time anthropology professors does applied anthropology research. All of us are involved in some form of like consulting or what we call cultural resource management in Diane Hansen's case, or medical anthropology, or trying to make substance abuse programs work better in rural communities. All of us are doing it applied anthropology. And so it's kind of a blurry distinction, but the idea is that there's sort of both sides to anthropology. A final thing that anthropology is for is to offer the widest possible perspective on how to approach human problems. We live in a world with challenges, right? No matter what, there's always going to be challenges. Some of the challenges in the 21st century are particularly pressing. I have a picture here of a forest fire. There have been a lot of forest fires of late, both literal and metaphorical, all sorts of things that could be better. And indeed, in all of human history, there's been things that could be better. I think part of what anthropology does is show us the different solutions that people have come up with for their various problems that then can maybe shed light on or give us insights into the problems we all collectively face. Clifford Geertz said that the point of interpretive anthropology was, quote, to make available to us answers that others guarding other sheep in other valleys have given. In other words, to take one example, if we're trying to make sure that, we have kids that are, the rising generation is well informed, able to be responsible and hardworking, one approach would be to only consider how we've done that in the United States. Another approach would be, let's look at all the different cultures of the world and their child rearing practices and see kind of what has worked and what has not, and the different approaches people have taken over thousands of years, right? Most societies that have been around for a long time have probably come up with at least a moderately successful approach to basic questions of like how to raise the next generation. And let's see if maybe there's some insights for us. This idea that there's not just one answer to a lot of these problems we face. One of the ways I like to think about it is different cultures are like the pages of an owner's manual, but like an owner's manual for Earth, right? So if I am trying to understand how to use my sweet GMC Acadia from 2009, it doesn't make sense to like rip out 3 pages and ignore the rest, because there's a whole lot of other stuff the car can do that's on the other, let's say, 90 pages. Similarly, if you're trying to understand how to live sustainably, justly, responsibly here on the planet Earth, how to make sure our societies are good places for us to live, it doesn't make sense to only look at what one culture has come up with. It makes sense to look at the whole owner's manual, all the different sort of solutions that people have come up with over time. In a sense, the thousands of different cultures or thousands of different attempts to get this whole humaning thing right. Wow, so we're going from very idealistic now to literally an image of money raining down from the sky, which might seem a little greedy. It's making it rain, as the kids say. But anyways, the question is, do people get jobs in anthropology? So this may be relevant to only a couple of you, but I did want to address it before we close the lecture. You know, you might be saying at this point in the lecture, well, this is all really interesting, but I'm curious, why have I never run into an anthropologist before? Do they just not have jobs other than college professors? No, they're actually, you may very well have run into anthropologists before. They probably were not called that. There are definitely jobs for anthropologists. I'm not going to say they're like the highest paying jobs in the world, nor am I going to say that there's like just this like massive unmet need for them. And although actually Bureau of Labor Statistics say that it's an increasing, but it's kind of like a slow increase, not this like crazy exponential increase. But anyways, there are anthropology jobs out there though, outside of being a professor. And so I've mentioned some of those: working in user design, working for government, working for historic preservation, especially here in Alaska. There's a lot of work in what's called cultural resource management, work with tribes, things of this nature. So anthropology, I think, is a field where you can get work. So if you're interested in majoring in the field, I would love to talk to you about it. Or if you're interested in just sort of like minoring in it and having it be sort of a complement to what you're doing in medicine or business or whatever, come talk to me. I'd love to talk to you. Or talk to any one of our other wonderful faculty, which include Diane Hansen, our archaeologist up in Anchorage, Dr. Kristen Ogilvie, an excellent cultural and medical anthropologist, Sally Carhare, also an excellent cultural and medical anthropologist, myself down here at Kenai Peninsula College. I didn't have a picture of Rebecca, but also Rebecca Lamburn, who also teaches anthropology here at Kenai Peninsula College. And so there's a lot of folks here that can be a resource if you are kind of interested in going that direction. But I'll stop the hard sell now. You don't have to major in anthropology to have a good time in this class. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there, because there are probably, like, you know, in a class of 15, there's going to be 2 or 3 students who are majoring in anthropology. So hopefully that was helpful to you. But the point is, I'll finally wrap it up. You don't need to slap me like Batman is slapping Robin in this picture. But to wrap it up, anthropology is a social science, also arguably humanity. It studies humanity, and it does that across all of time and space, and there's good reason for that. And I think it has a lot of insight for all of us that live in an increasingly diverse place. You live in Alaska, and you live there in the 21st century. By nature, you are interacting with many, many people who come from different communities than yourself, or if you haven't been, you will be soon. So hopefully anthropology can help us do that better, and that's the goal in this course. And that's it for this lecture. Thank you.